tonight and you'll be Superman. What's up? Cause up now. There's a way.
So I bought a new motorcycle. This is a 2004 Suzuki GSXR 750 and I love it. And I'm going to tell you on why you should get one too. So first I'm going to talk about what I really like about this bike, and then I'm going to tell you about what I really don't like about this bike and, things that maybe could be improved. So the first thing I like about this bike, and the main reason I got this bike, is because it's very fast and very exciting to ride. This bike is a true super sport bike. I mean, if you think about it, it is a street legal race bike that's just used on the track. This bike has around 140 horsepower and 80 pound-feet of torque and weighs about 350 pounds without you on it. It has 6 speeds and a 15,000 RPM redline. So this bike can hit 90 miles an hour in first gear at the redline, and under full acceleration the front wheel will lift off the ground. It has a top speed of 186 miles an hour and is faster than almost all other vehicles on the road. The only vehicles that will come close to beating this bike are supercars or cars close to 800 horsepower. This bike is fuel injected, it's not carbureted, so it always starts and it's more responsive. The brakes are very good. They're not Brembo brakes, but they're still pretty good. It's got 2 pistons in the front, 1 in the back, like most sport bikes do. And it's almost as fast as newer modern sport bikes, to be honest. Yes, you have the 2022 Suzuki GSXR 1000 with 200 horsepower from the factory. Yeah, that has 60 more horsepower than this bike, but compared to like a new 750 with maybe 150 or 160 horsepower, I mean, extra 20 horsepower, it's not that significant compared to this bike, considering this bike's 18 years old as of 2022. And to put it in perspective, this bike is way faster than a 1985 Suzuki GSXR 750. The other thing I like about this bike is it's very aerodynamic and it's very nimble. So as I said before, with all the power that this bike has, it takes very little to get it up to speed. You can easily hit the speed limit in first gear, and you have 5 gears left to go. The bike changes direction very quickly when you tell it to. It's very responsive. It handles like it's on rails. It's very fast. Like I said, it's essentially a street legal race bike. The bike is very smooth when you ride it, and it's very smooth at high and low speeds. The bike doesn't really like to go slow like on city roads. It primarily wants to be on the highway and go fast, but 100 miles an hour feels like 60. Another thing I like about this bike is the styling. The graphics look very nice and have held up well over time. I like the graphics because they are bigger than what you get on modern bikes today. Like the newer GSXRs have smaller graphics, they don't look as cool in my opinion as this bike does. I like how this bike has the tinted windshield. I like how it's yellow. I feel like the yellow paint stands out and is more unique and noticeable than other combinations. Yeah, I like the black and white combo of modern bikes, but the yellow paint has grown on me. I don't really see many yellow motorcycles, and I think it's kind of cool. And I love the black wheels. I think with the yellow and black color combination, the black wheels really make this bike pop. And I really like how the carbon fiber Yoshi exhaust look, and it sounds great. This bike is also decently comfortable for a sport bike, as long as you don't take it on a very long distance. Shorter trips, it's fine. Same with medium distance trips, but I've taken this bike on a 2-hour trip on the highway before, 100 miles each direction, and it's pretty comfortable and it performed really well. Occasionally you get a little bit of a cramp and you got to stand up and move your legs around, just because of the crouched position you're in with your legs up. But if you're young, for the most part, you can handle it. Or if you're in good shape, you can handle it. It's really not that big of a deal as you would think. Also, this bike has around a 3.5 gallon tank. It usually costs me around $15 to fill it if I put premium gas in it, which I do because it requires, I think, over 91 octane. So figuratively, you can get about 40 to 50 miles a gallon depending on how you ride it, which is about 120 to 150 miles per tank. I usually get about 120 miles to a tank before I have to fill it up. I don't get the best mileage as I could, but when you're riding a sport bike, you don't really care about your gas mileage. You ride this bike to go fast. You don't care about the gas mileage. The other thing I really like about this bike is it's very fun to ride it. Like I said, yeah, it's fun to take it places, but you want to ride the bike. It's more fun to ride the bike than it is to get to the destination. Like, you always want to ride this bike. It's hard to choose to drive a car, you know, especially when the weather's nice. You're like, I might as well just take the bike. And it's also fun to ride with friends and other people. And I have a few buddies who have motorcycles, and we routinely go on trips, and it's fun. This bike also gets a lot of attention. A lot of people will come talk to you about the motorcycle and ask you about it, and you also have other people who will try to potentially race you on the highway in their cars. One of the benefits, in my opinion, too, of owning a motorcycle is they're easy to work on and perform maintenance on. This bike doesn't require many expensive tools. You can do most of the work with basic hand tools, you know, nice socket set, wrench set, and you know, it's pretty reliable if you properly take care of it. You know, keep up on your oil changes, keep up on the coolant, and just, you know, other general maintenance items. It's really not hard to work on, and if you're a beginner, you can easily do it. This bike also doesn't take up much space like a car does. You know, you can park it in small areas, and if you even need more space, you can even put it on a rear paddock stand. So now that you know what I like about this bike, now we're going to talk about what I don't like about this bike, or we could say the cons of getting a motorcycle in general. One of the main cons of owning a motorcycle, they are very dangerous, and you have to understand the risks that what you're getting yourself into when you start riding. You know, motorcycle riders are about 35 times more likely to die in an accident than a car driver would. They're not as easily seen. You got to watch out for other drivers at all times. They don't see you. And, you know, if you zone out or get into an accident, something happens, you can be seriously injured or killed. You know, you got to watch for random stuff in the road. You got to anticipate, you know, when you're in a wooded area, if deer are going to run out in front of you, or if an animal is going to run out in front of you. You got to always give yourself an escape path. You know, I try to limit the amount of dumb things I do, so I don't have to make a split-second decision in the event of something going wrong. Because they're dangerous, you also get, you know, insurance prices tend to be high. Safe riders have better rates, you know, if you don't have any accidents or any of that, but most people who buy these bikes are young men, and they tend to be the most expensive. Because this bike, like I said, is a race bike, it is not a good first motorcycle. I would not recommend this bike to anyone who wants to start off riding and who's never ridden a bike before. This bike has very touchy throttle, and the brakes are very strong, and it's very responsive. If you do not know what you're doing, this bike will be very intimidating to you, and you will most likely crash it or not want to ride it. It has too much power for new riders. This bike also requires a high level of self-control and discipline. Like I said earlier, one of the things I love about this bike is it's very fast and very powerful, but it will easily break the speed limit in first gear, and you still have 5 gears left to go. This bike requires a lot of discipline and common sense. When you ride the bike, it feels like you want to go fast. The bike makes you want to go fast, and if you're not smart, you can end up in the hospital or dead. There is very little storage space. Really, the only storage space you get is under the rear seat, and you still don't really get enough room. I can put a few items in there, but I really just keep extra clothes and, you know, wallet, phone, that type of stuff. You're not going to put big stuff in there. So most places you go, you're probably going to want to bring a backpack with you. Now, I know I said this bike is pretty comfortable on long distance trips, but if you're planning on going on far trips, like state to state trips or across the country trips on a motorcycle, this probably wouldn't be your first trip. With this bike being a super sport, you're naturally leaning forward, so there's more stress on your body, there's more stress on your arms, there's more stress on your legs, there's more stress on your butt. You know, your legs and your butt are going to get tired over time, and you're not going to be sitting as upright as you are on like a sport touring motorcycle or like a Harley. You essentially sacrifice comfort for power and speed and appearance and looking cool. Which is fine if that's what you want, but I'm just saying I would not take this bike on a multi-state trip, or at least if I did, I'd have to take breaks in between because it would get uncomfortable fast. You'd probably get muscle cramps. You will get muscle cramps because I get them sometimes. Now, because this bike is a 2004 model year, it doesn't have any rider aids. It does not have cruise control. It does not have traction control. It doesn't have the different mode selectors that the other GSXR bikes have that are newer than this bike. But that's okay. I don't particularly like that in my motorcycles, and I like the raw experience of riding a motorcycle. You know, I don't really like computers helping in that sort of way and cutting power. Also, this bike is not really fun to ride when the weather is bad. I tend to really only take this bike out when clear. I'm not going to say sunny because I ride it when it's cold, but it's not as fun when it's windy because the wind likes to blow you around since you're only 350 pounds and you're very light. And you can ride this bike in the rain, I just don't really recommend it. I mean, the bike is pretty touchy with the throttle and just the seating position, you know, it's kind of aggressive. And you're not going to want to ride this bike in moderate and heavy rain. It's going to feel more dangerous and you're going to be more on edge. Yeah, you know, it all depends on the tires that you have. I have touring tires on my bike, not actual track tires, which will also make a big difference in the rain. But I tend to leave the bike at home when it's a moderate rain or heavy rain. I will ride the bike in light rain, but then you also got to remember when you're riding in rain, you're going to get wet. So if you don't have waterproof clothing or waterproof gear, you're going to get wet and you're going to get cold. And the rain hurts when it hits you. You can ride this bike in the cold. I do. I ride anything above 40 degrees as long as the roads are clear. But you got to have good cold weather gear. It's still enjoyable to ride when it's cold, but it's not as fun as it is in the summer. But it's still fun to get out on the bike when it's cold. It's a different experience. Another thing you got to remember is when you ride this bike, you have to be responsible. I'm saying this because that's kind of a con. It requires a lot of responsibility and plan. You always got to be planning ahead when you're riding. You always got to give it your full attention when you're riding. You know, you need to be able to ride driving patterns of other people. You got to be able to anticipate other people's moves and what they're going to do. You got to notice if you think they're going to change lanes in front of you, if they're going to turn left in front of you, if they're going to rear end you. You know, like I said, you always want to give yourself an escape path and ride defensively as much as you can. And because it's not really a practical bike, you can't really take it everywhere. If you're going out with friends, you're probably not going to want to take the bike, especially if they don't have bikes. You're probably going to want to ride with them. Another thing about owning a motorcycle is they are easy targets. You know, if you leave this bike unattended in an area for too long, people can mess with it. You know, thieves can take the bike. If you leave it unattended for a long period of time, people can sit on it. People can knock it over. You know, there's a bunch of stuff that people can do to your bike, which you have to plan where you go, because you don't want to end up in a bad area and have to leave the bike in a bad area for an extended period of time where potential bad things could happen to it. When I go out, I like to use a steering lock. I use the one that's built in to the actual steering column. You know, turn the handlebars to the left and lock the steering wheel so people can't as easily steal it. They still can, you know, if you got like 4 guys, they could pick it up and put it in a van, but I feel like that's going to be pretty rare in broad daylight. So, you know, if you're going to leave it somewhere for a long period of time, maybe get a disc lock that you can put on the front brake rotor. Or even better, get a big metal chain the bike, something immovable so nobody can steal it. One of the final things I would say I don't like about owning a motorcycle is the negative stereotypes that come along with this bike. You know, a lot of people don't like motorcycles. You know, and on top of that, a lot of people don't like sport bike riders because they think they're assholes. You know, they're known for excessive speeding, lane splitting, you know, getting angry at car drivers who pull in front of them when they're going 3 times the speed limit on the highway. And then even on top of those stereotypes, then you have the GSXR stereotypes where you get, you know, the guy in the white wife beater with the cargo shorts and the flip-flops. And, you know, you just get, bikes get a bad rap. You know, people think you're trying to kill yourself. They call them donor cycles, all that stuff. You know, oh, I know someone who got in a motorcycle accident and they're in a wheelchair now. It's like, well, you know, I know people who get in car accidents and who are dead. So, like, yes, motorcycles are more dangerous, but if you mitigate your risk, you will be fine for the most part. If you don't drink when you ride and you don't do stupid shit, you'll be okay. Just pay attention and don't do dumb shit.